Welcome to the Spotters Podcast. Tonight, my guest is a photographer who lives for speed, precision, and adrenaline. From the roar of jet engines to the screech of the tires, he captures the art of motion, freezing split-second moments that most only dream of seeing. Let's welcome Brandon Connelly. Welcome to the show, Brandon. How you doing?
Good.
All right.
Fly by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, I'm always flying by the seat of my pants, man. It's crazy.
How we do it.
Yeah. How did you get into this distraction that we all have of photography?
So, interestingly enough, I think I've been around aviation since I was probably almost old enough to walk. My dad is an aviation enthusiast, and so I grew up around it. I grew up just outside of Buckley Air Force Base in Aurora, Colorado. So I was constantly just parked out with my dad along the runway, on the frontage roads and stuff like that. And back in those days, they had the Hueys, the Blackhawks, or not the Blackhawks, the Hueys, the Cobras, and a lot of the older aircraft, C-5 Galaxies were a common thing back then, going in and out of there. But it was so cool to just sit there and watch them just practice up and down the base. It was even the point where you would see Hueys flying down the runway, and you'd have guys doing the rappel drills just hanging from ropes. For a kid like me at 3 years old, 4 years old, whatever, I thought that was the craziest thing in the world. But there was an F-16 wing that flew out of there as well. And I mean, I was always around it. And I got to a point where we went to air shows every year too. I was at air shows every chance we got. I got to a point where I could pretty much tell you what a fighter jet was flying over without seeing it. It was like a mastery, if you will, when I was a kid. I have pictures of me. The funny thing is, one of the pictures that I actually still have, and I actually have it saved on my phone, and I reference it when I talk to people about my aviation background. It's a picture of me and my grandfather. I was probably 4 years old. We're standing next to Fifi's propeller, and my grandfather's got his old film camera. I actually have it back here in my case, but he's got his old film camera strapped around his neck. So photography was a big thing in my family as well, for my whole life. My dad did aviation photography as a hobby at air shows. I can't tell you how long and how often I sat in front of a slide projector as a kid, and my dad would just go through slide after slide. For those of us that are familiar with that kind of stuff, looking at negatives and all of that stuff from the film days. So that's kind of where it all spawned from, was my dad. Not just from the attending the events and being interacted with it, but also the side of the photography side as well.
That's awesome, man. You're talking about 3 generations right there of photography and aviation. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's when you started your aviation love. How about capturing, automobiles and motorsports?
So photography as a whole, just to even start there, right? Not even just automotive and motorsports, but just photography as a whole, really started for me at an early age. I got my first 35 millimeter film camera at an early age type thing. Obviously back in the day, I was playing with the little Kodak disposable cameras, and all of that stuff. It started at an early age and just kind of stuck with me and progressed, as things happened. It was probably about 2000, somewhere between 2008 and 2010. I got a digital camera, a proper one. My first digital camera was a Canon Rebel XTI. And so I started with that. That was the very first camera I started with. And I just started going to cars and coffees and stuff like that and just taking pictures for fun. And I'm a very outgoing, extroverted person. I talk to anybody and everybody. So I just started talking to car owners and stuff like that. And it really ended up turning into sharing photos with them from the car events. And then they started going, wow, you kind of have a knack for this. You have the eye. They're like, I could see you doing something with this. And obviously at that point, I'm kind of already well progressed age-wise, to the point where it's man, I look back at it now and I'm I wish I would have started sooner. I started, really dabbling in it, started connecting with more and more car owners here locally, and doing photo shoots for them, just for their cars, for their garages, home offices, whatever. And that's where the automotive side really kicked off. And then what started as static stuff at a car event turned into static stuff in like random locations, and then all of a sudden I started getting this like feed, if you will, of rolling photography. And I'm like, how do I do that? How do I achieve that? Like, so I started that, and I've always been, to kind of back this up too, like I've always been around cars my whole life as well. My grandfather has classic cars. Both of my grandfathers, I took them to, they would come visit. We'd go to Daytona Turkey Rod Run, for Thanksgiving regularly. They'd talk about all the different cars they own, seeing all the muscle cars and stuff like that. So I've always been around that. I was around motorsports my whole life. My dad was on the pit crew for one of his coworkers who ran late night modifieds on like Friday, Saturday nights at one of our local tracks in Colorado when I was a kid. So I grew up around all this stuff. And so like I started now chasing the next step, which was elevating the automotive photography aspects. And so then it was like, okay, well, now I need to achieve rolling shots. Started finding ways to do that, started figuring that out. Now it's a little bit sketchy in the way that I did it for many, many years. No harnesses. I'd have somebody drive a car. I'd hang out the window on the passenger side or back seat or whatever, 30, 40 miles an hour cruising down the road type situation. And doing it in the little, like, I wouldn't say illegal, but not exactly legal stance. And so just progressing that. And of course, anybody who's in automotive, there's always that motorsports side of the person, right? So it's like, okay, well, now what? Like, now we've achieved this. Like, now let's start progressing into other realms. And it just became one of those things where the photography bug, if you will, for lack of better terms, was just one of those things where it's like, I've got to keep going. Like, I've got to keep finding new challenges, new things, like keep building that momentum. I knew when I dabbled in portrait photography for friends when I first started out as well. Just to kind of get a feel for it. I had some musician friends, I had modeling friends, all of that stuff. So I dabbled in that a little bit, and I found out very quickly that's not where I wanted to be. I was like, no, like posing people, like all of that stuff, it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's, little bag. But for me, it was one of those things that's like, I want to capture like moments. I want to capture action. And so it was like motorsports, sports, and that's when I started feeding into all of that. I said, well, if I can mix my passions from, air shows and automotive, mainly automotive at the time. I wasn't doing a whole lot of air show stuff, but mainly automotive. I was like, if I can mix my passion with automotive and photography, what else can I mix my passions with? Like, how else can I align them, right? And so then I started looking at, okay, well, I've played golf my whole entire life. I followed the PGA Tour. Tiger Woods was huge then. So then I started trying to align myself, because I actually worked at a golf course at the time as well, full time. And I was like, let me align myself with like golf and sports and see if I can't start taking my camera to like PGA Tour events, because on the practice days, they allow you to. So then I started doing that. And I got connected to a couple different outlets sports wise and started covering PGA Tour. And then as that continued to spawn out, then I ended up covering Orlando City soccer. I've covered U.S. men's national soccer. I've covered UCF football. You name it, like sports wise, you name it. I've pretty much dabbled in it a little bit. I had a roommate who dated an amateur MMA fighter. I've shot some MMA. Like, as challenging as that is, I've tried it. So on the sports side, I've had my hands in a little bit of everything. But yeah, I mean, that's where it all comes from. It's just been finding ways to mix my passions. One of the biggest achievements that I think I can say that I've accomplished, a goal that I set for myself on the automotive realm, going back to that, is I told myself when I first started, I said, I want to have a magazine cover with my photo on. Like, I want somebody to see my work on a newsstand. It happened. I think it was June 2018, I think it was the first one. I had two. I think it was June 2018, and then it was June 2020. It was for D Sport magazine. One of my clients at the time, my automotive clients, connected me to one of his car club buddies, and he said, hey, look, he's looking for a photo shoot for a magazine. And then so I got connected to him, and he's like, yeah, he's like, they actually want to put the car on the cover. He's like, so we really got to knock this out of the park. I was like, let's go. So we went out and we did 2 different shoots because I wanted to give the magazine as much to choose from as possible to make sure that we got that cover, no questions asked. And we got the cover of his S15. And then, so that was really awesome. It was an 8-page feature inside too, so that was really cool. And that one, I never saw that one on newsstands anywhere. It wasn't one of those deals where like people were sending me pictures like, oh my God, look at this, you're on newsstands. I never got to see that one on newsstands. The company actually sent me a bunch of copies and stuff like that. But then the one in 2020, I did a 280Z with a Rocket Bunny wide body kit and a bunch of work done to it, stuff like that. There was a really cool history and story behind that car with the owner as well. And it actually went all over the place. Like we had, between the owner and myself, we had people sending us pictures of it on Barnes and Noble newsstands, grocery store newsstands, you name it, people were sending us pictures of it. And I was like, now that's what I was aiming for. Like to be able to, and like, I think at that point, I even walked into a Barnes and Noble and I was like, this is so cool. Cause I had to go see it for myself. And I was just like, goal achieved. So, that was one of the biggest things, photography wise for me. That was that chef's kiss moment where it was just like, this is where I wanted to be.
That's awesome, man. Congrats on that. That is a great feeling to see your work published. Going back to rollers, because I've dabbled in photography for like 20 something years, and rollers, man, that is, if you're not, I mean, I've done it in an unsuccessful, unsafe manner of like sticking my camera out the window type of deal, trying to capture it. I've set up tripods in my car, as I'm driving, and just kind of like, hopefully it's in a good angle. I've even sat like backwards in the passenger seat, just to kind of get it out the window. And I'm like thinking, man, I just need a truck, or I need to get one of those like suction mounts. But then you have a multi-$1,000 camera sticking outside, Do you do any of that? Do you have like a GoPro outside just to get some like video? No?
I've done it. So the only time we've ever run like an action cam of any sort like that, with a suction cup mount. Now, here's the funny thing is like we've done, me and some buddies, because obviously I have a lot of friends who track, that I connect with at racetracks and stuff on the motorsport side. I've done a bunch of private track days and stuff as well for people. But like we've always done the suction cup mounts to the race cars, right? So it's like just strap it on outside and just kind of get the footage that way. We've only done that. I've only done that like twice for like actual rolling shot shoots. One of them was one of my very first, and one of my most significant rolling shot shoots, which was a Gembala Mirage GT, which if you know anything about that car, it's very, very rare. It's basically a Porsche Carrera GT with a like kit. It's like a full custom build type situation. Gembala is kind of like Shelby is to like Mustang, right? So it's like Gembala is that to Porsche. And so you're talking about a very, very rare car. And so we obviously had to strap up the BMW I was shooting out of that my friend was driving at the time just to capture this, because it was part of a car collection where it didn't see the road much. It literally sat in the garage, and kind of just rotted away, for lack of better terms, for the most part. This was like a service that was being done. And so it was like, we have to take it out for like 10 road miles. And I was like, one of my friends at the time managed the collection, and he's like, hey, we've got to take this thing out. He's like, we need to capture this. Like, if you want to, like, let's try to go viral with this. And, that was back in the day when there were a lot of manufacturer photographers that were big. So it was hard to go viral with a photo. And I mean, it's even harder now. But like even then, back then, it was still hard. Like we didn't get the attention we thought we would. But for me, it was one of those iconic captures. I did it down one of the main highways through downtown. And if you look through my Instagram feed and you go all the way down to the bottom, it's one of the very first posts, I think. It's a very bright orange car. And it was probably one of my favorite captures ever, as far as automotive photography for me. And then the second one would have been when the same collection, same scenario, service drive, stuff like that. It was one of the Koenigsegg CCXRs from the end of Fast Five, the movie. Both of them were from the same collection here, and we got to take it out for a service drive, and it's one of two in the world. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say no to this. You don't have to twist my arm too hard. I'll go do rolling shots of it on the highway. I'm good. So, yeah, those were really the only two times. Other than that, I've pretty much, as sketchy as this is going to sound, I've pretty much always had my clients, and this is unbeknownst to me. Usually I'm just in the zone shooting, and then after the shoot, they'll text me pictures from behind, like from behind their steering wheel, out the windshield of me hanging out the car shooting, and then they're like, "Look at you," and I'm like, "Okay." But yeah, we don't do too much of that. Majority of my stuff is, pride myself on the fact that I handhold everything. As crazy as that sounds, to pride myself on it, given the nature of a rolling shot. I don't use mounts, I don't use gimbals, all of that stuff. And seeing people use gimbals to do rolling shots and hang that out the car, I'm like, okay, one, I know the weight of that. My R6 with a 20, my 16 to 35 2.8 on it, that weighs enough. Like, I don't need a whole entire DJI setup out the window with like three hands, type situation, and then the wind and everything, and trying to balance all that. And I'm not the type of person to really focus on, like needing a minivan or something like that with a back door open. I've seen plenty of that on Instagram. More power to you if you have that available to you. I didn't, so I just made work with what I've got. 9 times out of 10, it was me and my Audi A3 out my passenger seat while one of my friends drove, and I made it work. But for the most part, yeah. I mean, I handheld everything. I've got a nice wrist strap on my R6, and that's literally what I rely on. And I'll even I'll hang it down, and I'm pretty sure I've never been to the point where, like, you see these videos of like these kids where they're like literally like a foot, 2 feet with their camera off the road. You don't have to get that low, especially with a wide angle lens. You can still be 5-10 feet off. Like, you can be about half a car doors down to the road and still get those really low looking angles. And then it all comes down to settings, right? You just got to nail your settings.
Yeah. Yeah, I went onto your Instagram here. I'm looking at your D Sport cover of the Z Incredible Hulk. Now I see that you posted the cover shot right after. Do you edit for the magazine, or does the magazine kind of take your photo and kind of do it how they want for the cover?
So all of my shoots, it's specifically the magazine ones, both of them, I edited. Now, for the cover, they will do their own twist on it, right? Like, if you look at the shot versus what ended up on the magazine, the colors are still pretty much there, right? Like, they didn't do a whole lot to it.
No, they
What
just
they
got
did,
like the background.
right. They cut out a little bit of background, they changed a little bit of background, but they didn't do anything really to it. And that was the glorious part of it. Now, they did ask for the RAWs, so they did have it to their disposal, and I'm not going to say whether they did or didn't edit. I don't honestly know, because they had both files. Judging by what I see on the cover, I've actually got the S15 one right there behind me. It's obviously, I don't know what they did. The colors on that one look true to me, basically, to my edit. I don't think they did, but I couldn't honestly tell you.
Yeah, and all of these rollers are really I love it how they're so smooth. Through the car is crisp, but you still got that motion blur in there. How do you balance the sharpness with the motion blur?
I think it really comes down to a very, well balanced setting. You really have to find that harmony between all of the settings and also the speed, right? Like, the speed that you're traveling at and your subject car is traveling at plays a balance in there too. Because obviously you kind of have to set your shutter based off of your speed. If you're doing 30 miles an hour, you've got to kind of compensate for that to make sure that you're still getting that feel that makes it look like you're going fast. You can kind of relate it the way that I look at it is you can kind of relate it to like aviation photography. You've got a propeller, right? You want that full disc that we all aim for when it comes to like the propeller planes. You've got to nail that shutter speed. The motion with the rolling shots is the same way. That's where you get the nice, smooth, clean road that shows motion. You get the background that's a little bit, motion blurred and stuff like that. You've got to find the harmony between your shutter speed. You've got to find the harmony with your aperture. So like with rolling shots, and most of car photography, unless you're doing detail shots, so like the whole car shots when you've got like a static spot, and I had to learn this really quick. So like if you're doing, there's one shot that I love to no end, but I see the flaw in it every time I look at it. It's my shot with the Eleanor, the 67 GT500 Eleanor, and it's sitting in like a old town on a brick road, and it's kind of like 3/4 hard parked with the headlights on. I look at that photo, and it's a gorgeous photo. And I don't think that unless you know your photography, you're going to pick up on it. But the flaw that I see is if you look at the very rear corner of the car, like at the spoiler, it's out of focus because my f-stop was too low. So obviously you've got to have your f-stop high. For rolling shots, I usually shoot, about a 8 to 11, just because one, you're going to get, all the car in focus. You're not going to have any point where it's not focusing on it. Two, you're going to get a little bit of focus on your background. Your background's not going to be super, super out of focus. But you're not going to be so focused in that like your background's just going to have all the detail, because obviously you don't want it to have all the detail. You're going for that motion aspect. And then, so with the f-stop, shutter speed, depending on speed. So if we're doing about 40 miles an hour, I'm usually at like 1/30, 140, and there's people that'll drop it all the way down to like 10. Like wow. People get crazy with how low they get with shutter speeds on these. And I mean, to me, it all depends on the surface of the road. If you know you're on a bumpy road, and that's the hardest challenge at that point for me, is like finding good, smooth roads, because obviously you don't want roads where it's like this. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is like you've got to figure out your environment too. So there's a massive amount of thought and balance that have to go in to get that money shot right, for the sharpness, clarity, all of it. But yeah, speed, f-stop, shutter speed, and then of course everything else falls into play from there.
Awesome, man. That sounds super fun. Now, when you're the passenger, how do you anticipate that shot with not even paying attention to how the road is?
I'm thankful enough that I am blessed with two very skilled drivers that I rely on for my rollers. There's really only two people I will trust to do this for me. One's my stepbrother. He's got many, many years of experience behind a wheel. He actually owns a Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0 that is just hands down gorgeous. And I would probably try, like, the biggest thing for me, the only reason I picked these two as well, is because being a father of 2 under 5 now, my biggest thing is safety, right? My biggest thing is making sure we all come home in one piece, and that I'm able to come home and continue to enjoy things with my kids, stuff like that. So I know I can trust these two with my life. My other one is like a brother to me. He's been a friend of mine. Actually, there's 3 people, sorry. I sometimes forget about the other one because he lives a few hours away and I don't see him as frequently as the other 2. But it's the biggest thing of like these 3 people I know I can, 1, trust my life with, 2, they'll take care of us on a safety standpoint. I don't have to worry about what's in front of me or behind me. I can focus on what my main mission is, and that's getting the shots. Prime example, right? We were doing a rolling shot, a rolling shoot, and we had 2 subject cars. So we were doing a staggered shoot, and we're going down this highway, and I usually try to shoot them first thing in the morning just to minimize traffic. So like I'll pick a Sunday morning.
Too.
Right, golden hour, but I'll also pick like a Sunday morning when everybody's either sleeping in or they're at church. And like, so that way we have the road to ourselves type situation. I'm not worried about impeding traffic. I'm not worried about a bunch of cops sitting out there looking for us doing dumb stuff. So we were actually cruising down a highway, and all of a sudden I feel like this like smack on my back a couple times, and I'm we've got three cars, so we're 3 lanes wide at this point, and we're impeding traffic on the highway. And he's like, "Get in the car." I was like, "Why?" He goes, "Look out the back window." I lean in and I look straight out the back window. There's an FHP Charger just like cruising behind us. So Florida Highway Patrol's just chilling behind us, watching all of this. And of course, I'm not seatbelted in because I'm hanging out the car and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, great, this might be the first time I've ever gotten pulled over and getting a ticket for doing rolling photography. And I was like, you know what? Chalk it up that if I've made it this far, because this was only a couple of years ago, I was like, if I've made it this far with this being my first time, I'll consider that a win. In some way, shape, or form. But so like I popped back in, we rolled the windows up, I strapped my seatbelt in, and I just waited for the lights to come on behind us while he's driving. And then all of a sudden, so the other two backed off and they kind of made it look like they weren't really going to continue to hang out with us. And he just bailed. He left. He got off the highway, and I was like, all right, back to it. So they pulled right back up, and we went right back to work. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I know that these boys always have my back. And like I said, the confidence that I have in them, in knowing that they're going to make sure we all go home in one piece and there's no issues, allows me to focus on the shot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was hoping that in your story he was going to come up alongside you and get some rollers of the FHP.
I would say something, but I don't want to out my boy that was driving that day just because I don't want to put him out in public on something. But let's just say it would have been an interesting scenario.
Yeah, I just found the bottom of your feed here. Is this you sticking out of the car? There's an orange, the orange GT, the Porsche.
Is it like a reddish? Is it like a reddish GT3, and I'm sticking out the side of it? Yeah. Now, granted, I have done, so like on the rolling side too, like I have, one of the other things I always wanted to do on the rolling side was do some on-track photography, because like I've covered the 24 hours of Daytona, the Rolex 24, I've covered the 12 hours of Sebring. I've been thankful enough to work for a company that sponsored an IMSA racing car, and I went to like the 6 hours at Watkins Glen, stuff like that as media. And being working media, you kind of get to see a little bit more behind the scenes type stuff. During the Rolex 24 at Daytona, they do what's called their qualifying and their practice sessions like weeks before. It's called the Roar Before the 24, and their actual IMSA accredited photographers, like their actual team hired photographers. I've got pictures of like the camera car on track with like the actual legit race cars behind them, and that's how you see some of these insane like race cars on the banking. Like they do rolling shots on the racetrack. And I always told myself, I was like, one of these days I want to try that. Like I want to know what that feels like, because I've been, again, I can only go back to like my photography's blessed me in so many different ways. For all my car people, you guys will probably appreciate this. I've been passenger seat in a Lamborghini 570-4 Gallardo Superleggera with Valentino Balboni driving the car, and did 4 laps around the full Rolex 24-hour road course. And this man was a 40-year like retired test driver for Lamborghini. Pretty much drove every Lamborghini ever made for the most part. And so to be able to ride with him, that was insane. But like having been in like multiple high-end cars on the track and getting to experience that rush, I'm always like, man, I want to know what it's like to do rollers on the track. So finally, big shout out to one of my friends, Cody, and his group that he puts together regularly. They do a lot of charity rallies and stuff like that, the exotic car rallies and stuff throughout the Southeast and up the East Coast, called Gravity Rally. Huge shout out to them. They started hosting private track days down at Sebring, and he said, you know what? He goes, we're going to make your dreams come true type situation. He goes, I'm going to put you in the back of a car or a van, and he goes, I'm going to put a couple of exotic cars behind you, and you can do, rollers on the racetrack. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, during like lunch break, which was like an hour long, he goes, you guys can go out. The track has given us approval. You guys can go out and shoot. And I'm like, okay. So, of course, the track is like, well, we've got to have some rules here. You can't just go lay in a van. You need a harness. There's some guidelines there. And it was like, okay, cool. But like, I was able to, for 2 years, able to achieve that feeling and getting to experience that. And that was insane. Getting to lay down in the back of a van and, have, there's a shot of a camo McLaren 720S. It's even one of the main photos on the homepage of my website, um, where it looks like it's out of Forza or Gran Turismo. Like when I posted it, so many people were like I think I even captioned the post on Instagram that was like, "This isn't Forza" or something. Like I made some witty comment about it in my caption, but it looked straight out of a video game. But it was so surreal to get to like experience that, especially coming off the fact that the last time I had lain in the back of a van was up in Jacksonville, and I did a shot of a Lamborghini Murcielago SV, Lamborghini SVJ 63 Aventador, and a Pagani Huayra, all like 3 lanes on the highway behind the van, and it's just a head-on shot of all three. And that was without a harness. We won't talk about that. But it was a bit sketch. But yeah, like some of the behind-the-scenes photos I've gotten from some of the stuff I've done like that, it's just like, okay, cool. But again, I go back to just the experiences alone have been hands down incredible.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, man. Your automotive, I'm looking on your webpage now, your automotive photography is top notch. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at that camo job, man. That's crazy. How did you transition from automotive to capturing air to air?
So, so this is where we get to have the fun conversation, and this is the conversation everybody wants to have. It's really really hard to make that transition, and I'm still in the midst of it, to be completely honest, because I've been doing automotive for 14 years. So obviously, building the name, magazine covers, all of that stuff. You kind of go through, you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, now what? Um, and like I said, the biggest thing, and I'm gonna tell a little story here, but like the biggest thing for me was like my number one goal was always achieving a magazine cover, and then I did it twice. And so for me, it was always like, what's my next step? What's my next goal? Like what I need a target at the end of it all. I need that one thing that I need to like achieve and grab. And so I was like, what do we do now? Because obviously print all started dying right
Yeah.
about like I think D Sport was one of the last magazines that was really publishing outside of like your big manufacturer magazines like Road and Track, Car and Driver, stuff like that. And I was like, I don't shoot the type of content they're ever going to want to feature. I was more of like the tuner magazines and like all of that stuff. Um, and so it was like, okay, I've achieved print. I don't know where else I go automotive wise unless I start chasing the motorsport. And having kids, traveling becomes a big part of the motorsport realm, and that wasn't really aligning with where I wanted to be. So it's like, okay, what's next? And I started looking at it, and I'm starting to pay attention to car culture and stuff like that. And then I started taking, I got a full time job in automotive. Um, and so I've been around cars I've worked in automotive full time for the last 8 years. And so car culture outside of work kind of started wearing off, if you will. Like the drive to be around it, the passion for it was kind of like, eh. And so it was one of those things where like I stopped going to cars and coffees, and I stopped, kind of interacting in the car sense. And I was just like, I'm kind of burnt out in this. Like I need to take a break. And I think as a photographer, we all go through these like little lulls, right? Where it's like, okay, you kind of find yourself taking that break where it's like, I need to step away for a few minutes. And a few minutes actually turns into a couple of months at some point. My number one focus has always been on my family and making sure that they're first and foremost. Photography is always going to come second. Um, at this point in life, because I don't see it turning into a full time job. God willing, if he wants to present an opportunity, it's there. But I'm not really pursuing or like thinking it'll be a full time position. Because full time positions, staff wise and stuff, are few and far between, anyways, these days. It's all freelance and contract stuff for the most part. But so the biggest thing for me was all right, it's time to make a change. Let's take this to another level. Let's pun intended, right? Let's take this to a different realm And I'd been doing air show photography for a while, and I was like, okay, I want to find a way to do aviation photography. I've been around air shows, done it, and I started following a lot more aviation photographers because obviously my Instagram feed is nothing but car photographers for the longest time, and car photographers I looked up to. Massive shout out to some of them. Jamie Price, who does amazing motorsport work, and he travels all over the world. He does Formula One, all of that stuff. Larry Chen, god of Canon and automotive photography. As a Canon shooter, he's somebody I have always looked up to. But following his work has been insane. And it was always one of those things where you want to be them, but then it's like, okay, well, maybe it's not where I want to be. Maybe I need to shift. And so I started following a lot more aviation photographers. And then I came across one specific person who really caught my attention. And that was Mike Killian. Mike is awesome. Mike is extremely talented with a camera when it comes to anything you put in front of him. And following his work and seeing a lot of his air-to-air stuff when I first started really kind of aspiring to dive into the aviation realm, it was one of those things where I was like, man, I want to do this. I want to figure out how to do this. And so I finally got to meet him when Tom Richards put on his first P40 shootout up at the American Dream Sky Ranch. I went to the very, very first one, and that was such a cool experience. It was Father's Day weekend, so I was making a big sacrifice, missing my I think it was my first or second Father's Day weekend with my daughter. But I told my wife, I was like, this is something I need to do. This is what I want to do. And getting to play with, P40s and AT6s and stuff right there on the runway in a grass runway type situation, and getting that experience and getting to actually be in person and learn a little bit from Mike. And they were raffling off an air-to-air where you could go up in an AT6 and shoot the P40. And I was like, dude, I would love to win that. Didn't win it, but I think it kind of helped fuel the desire to chase it. So fast forward to Sun and Fun 2 years ago. I've been living down here in Florida. I've been going to Sun and Fun for 14, 15 years. And so Sun and Fun 2 years ago, I somehow stumbled across Aviation Photo Crew, which I'm sure a lot of aviation photographers that are here on the podcast listening know who they are. They've definitely blown up recently, Eric and his team. But you're talking about a team, if you don't know who they are, they travel all over the world. They're mainly from Europe, but they travel all over the world now doing some crazy, crazy, awesome flight missions, and it's open up to the public. That's the cool thing. They have a sky van. They throw you about 10 or 12 people up in it. So they finally got access to Sun and Fun, and I immediately jumped on it when I stumbled across it. It cost a pretty penny. I won't go into numbers, but it costs a pretty penny. If you want to DM me, I will tell you. I will tell you outside of the podcast what it costs. But I won't talk about it on the. But so I looked at my wife and I told her, I said, I'm doing this, and she goes, you're what? And I said, I'm doing this at least just one time, right? It was one of those things, and I had met at the shootout up at Tom Richards' event. I had also met Todd and Kelly. I think their last names. They do a ton of aviation photography, air-to-air stuff. They fly with Scott Slocum and a bunch of aviation photo crew missions, and I had met them. And I think they were the ones that actually kind of introduced me to aviation photo crew because I kept asking them how they were achieving all these different missions. And so, I ended up paying for a day to go up with aviation photo crew during Sun and Fun. And I mean, that's where a majority of my air-to-air work that you see on my portfolio came from. And for me, it was expensive, but at the same point, it was the only way that I saw that I was ever going to be able to achieve doing aviation, air-to-air work. Because it's how are you going to convince somebody that you're capable of doing it if you don't have the portfolio to show them? And so it was one of those things where it's just like any other genre of photography, right? Whether it be wedding photography, portrait photography, concert photography, anything, right? if you don't start somewhere, and sometimes starting somewhere means you're either doing it for free or you're coming out of pocket to do it, like this for prime example, you're never going to really develop that portfolio, and it's going to be harder to get work, and it's going to be harder to kind of make a name for yourself unless you happen to know somebody who's going to be like, yeah, sure, here's an opportunity, show me what you're worth.
Yeah.
And a lot of different genres are easier for that. Sports photography, that's kind of how I got into sports photography, was getting to know somebody, and it's like, hey, go show me what you can do. You don't have a portfolio board, show me what you can do. Concert photography, I've kind of heard and seen it from that side as well. But like, when you're talking about air to air, you're talking about a very, very safety risk, like a big safety risk there. You're talking about a lot more involvement on all of that. It's not something that someone's just going to be like, yeah, you don't know what you're doing? Sure, I'll take you up. Let's go. Show me what you can do. So it was kind of cool because it was one of those things where, like, being up at Aviation Photo Crew, yeah, it was a full different experience than what an actual, like, solo air-to-air mission is like. But, like, I feel like it was a good step to getting my feet wet in the experience side, kind of seeing the safety aspects, learning from them about the harnessing and the tethering of your cameras to yourself. The whole gaff tape thing. Like, I'd never honestly gaff taped any of my camera stuff. And so, like, they're like, you need to gaff tape your memory card door closed. You need to gaff tape your lenses to your camera. You need to gaff tape your battery door closed. No lens hoods. Basically anything that could come off your camera. No.
Yeah.
Not one bit. And it's like the other rule too is like no changing lenses, no changing batteries, no changing memory cards while you're in flight with all the doors open. So like it was very, very helpful to kind of soak all of that in and kind of watch the team and some of the other established air-to-air photographers that were on the flight with us. Like Ricardo was actually on my flight too, so that was kind of cool. And so getting to kind of, work alongside him and kind of learn a little bit from him as well. Yeah, I mean, soaking all that in was the massive, massive learning aspect that really helped with where I went next was I ended up doing and getting hired to do air-to-air for Melbourne Flight Training, which is a flight school over here in Melbourne, Florida, based out of Melbourne Airport. They have a couple of Cirrus SR-22s. They have a Tecnam, and they have their 172 fleet. And so like they were like, hey, we need some promo material for our marketing team, and they hired me to come do that. They threw me up in a Cessna 310. We took the luggage door off. I harnessed up. I had my videographer with me, so he could get some footage for them as well on the video side. And it was just the two of us. We took off at dark 30 on a Friday morning or something like that, and we flew up and down the coast over the ocean. But I mean, that was a completely different experience because it was such a small plane, just us, like type situation. We had 6 planes. It was insane. But yeah, I mean, the aviation photo thing, if the aviation photo crew, if anybody's looking to jump into and see what air-to-air is like, not to promo for them or anything, but that would be something that I would recommend to anybody if you can afford it, is to just go up with them for one day. One, you'll get to photograph planes that not everybody will ever get to do air-to-air with. I mean, they get some insane join-ups. I mean, the day that I went up, we were supposed to have the one and only Super Constellation from Lewis Air Legends flying with us because it had made its debut at Sun and Fun that year. And then right when it was taking off, they ended up having a landing gear issue and had to emergency land right back down. So it kind of scrapped that one. When in my life without Aviation Photo Crew would I ever say that I've got a portfolio with a F-16 Fighting Falcon, one of the F-18s from the Rhino demo team, an SBD Dauntless from CAF Georgia, just looking at the list, right? I'm like, man. And then I look at what they're doing now, like up in Abbotsford, they had the F-22 Raptor demo team. They've had B-17, C-5 Galaxy. Yeah. Their list is insane, just for the USA side. We won't even dive into what they do overseas.
Yeah, that's one thing they say when they send out those emails. They're doing it like a year in advance. They're making sure that they're booked up, and you never know. It could be an emergency that the aircraft didn't show up. It could be a fuel issue that didn't show up. But they tell you ahead of time. You never know what's going to join. And I remember I was at Sun and Fun this year, And I had looked up, and there's the Skyvan, and there's the B or the A26 was behind it for a little bit. Then you had the aerobatics back there. I mean, it was just, you had jets joining. It's crazy. When you go up with the aero team, are you pretty much like one flight and you're done, or is it like a full day of flying?
It's a full day. So, I mean, you'll pay a couple $1,000s. We'll just put it that way,
Yeah.
right? For
Yeah.
one day. And so the day that I went up, and granted, they learned a lot because it was their very first year that I went up with them. I actually talk to Eric every now and again through Instagram DMs and emails and stuff, just kind of keeping in tabs with him in communication. Because I will eventually go back up with them again. It was a fantastic experience. Like I said, it's something I recommend. Eric and his crew are hands down amazing. They will help you in any way, shape, or form. And they will help you learn too if you don't have the knowledge for what you're getting yourself into. Um, they'll help you fine tune your settings and stuff like that. They're very, very great. Um, but so our first flight was right at sunrise. Like we went up again, dark. You're going up right before the sun. And then that day was 7 join ups, I think. I think it was 7 join ups. And the other thing too is like obviously you're not up there all day because our final flight was at sunset. So it was a few up and downs. They did have to learn kind of like the logistics of Sun and Fun because once the airshow space opens, right? Because obviously a lot of their join ups during these airshow events is based on performers, right? It's the
Yeah.
performers go up, so do they, and then whether it's before or after the demo, that's when they're doing their join ups. And so in Lakeland, once the airshow space opened, we couldn't get back down, and they had to kind of figure that out. We actually ended up landing at like this little dump. It was actually kind of cool. I'd never been there, and I don't think I ever would have without this. But there's a little airtow in what's called Bartow, Florida, and the airport's actually got some history to it. They have like P-51 stuff and like all that in their little lobby and their quote unquote terminal. And it's just a little tiny middle of nowhere airport. It's one of those you're like, this is actually here. We actually had to land there a couple times because we couldn't get back into the Lakeland airport. And so it was one of those where like we just landed and we hung out in the lobby in the terminal for a little bit and then we took off and went back up, and that was also our fueling spot. So they learned really quickly on the first day or their first year about that, which I think probably helped them much better for the last couple years now. Eric had told me this past year they did 15 join ups in one day, which is massive. And just seeing, like I said, just seeing the content that's coming out of there from not just their team, but everybody, is just insane. And the things that they're doing and the planes that they're getting to work with, they've done, and, I'm kind of excited for what they're doing next year. And this is where I really want to try to join up with them next year is they'll be back at Sun and Fun again, but they're doing Oshkosh for the first time next year. They're going to be at Oshkosh. You want to talk about the possibilities of join ups at any air show in the, like, that's it right there. You could get anything and everything up there. So I'm kind of like, well, what do I do? Because the other problem too that you run into is it's like they fly for, so like Sun and Fun, right? They fly for 4 days of Sun and Fun.
Yeah.
And it's like it's expensive. Like you couple $1,000s a day, you span it out over 4 days flying with them.
I mean,
You're gonna
it pretty much, yeah, it's covering their fuel costs for their Skyvan.
Absolutely, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure they also pay some of like they help offset some of the flight costs for the join ups as well. To try to help entice them to come up and do that. And obviously they provide them content as well from the fly. The thing about it is like you don't know what you're going to get on the day you go up. So if you buy one day, it's like a lottery. You don't know what you're going to get. And even then, like Eric can give you a list the night before of what he's hoping that is going to fly with you guys. But then even on the day of, like we've talked about, something could happen. And guess what? That plane's not coming. So it's one of those things where it was like, did I want the pictures of the Constellation air to air on my first ever air to air flight? Absolutely. Was I heartbroken about it? Not really, because I had so many other shots. We had Panchito, the B-25, we had the SBD, like I said, we had the Red Tail P-51, which to me was kind of like a bucket list thing because that's just a specific and very special plane in itself. Kind of looking at I'm assuming this would be a question you ask is like, what's my bucket list air-to-air plane? In all honesty, I think it'd have to be like a B-17 Flying Fortress, just because there's not many left, right?
Yeah.
And it's always a B-17 has always been one of my favorite planes. I lived from Memphis Belle as a kid. If certain planes were still flying, like the F-14 Tomcat, I'd be like, all right, let's check that one off the list. Because obviously as a kid, Top Gun, number one movie of all time. But with things that are still flying, B-17 probably is the number one. Number two would be an A-10 Warthog, which sad to say that they are retiring now. Totally heartbreaking. Number three would be a Corsair, and that was the fun one, was watching them in Lakeland last year and seeing the content come out of the Corsair flying with the F-18. I was like, oh, somebody even sent me a story of like someone looking up, and all you see is the Skyvan, and then you see the F-18 and the Corsair behind it, and I'm like, no, like FOMO kicked in so bad. I was like, I want to be up there. But yeah, so I'm kind of intrigued as to what they're aiming for next year. Like I said, Oshkosh, I don't know how they're going to pull that off because Oshkosh is insane. I went for the first time in 2023, first time ever, and we've already planned to go back next year. My dad, my stepbrother, and my dad talked about it my whole life. We got to go to Oshkosh. We got to go to Oshkosh. Never happened, and then finally we all agreed we were going. So we finally got to check that off the list, and now I'm hooked because it's such an amazing event. We do a whole week up there, a guys' weekend or a guys' week type thing, and I'll take both cameras and I'll just go insane. I think I came home off of 4 days up there that year with like 15,000 photos. I was just snapping away the whole day, every day.
I almost made it up to Oshkosh this year. And when I say almost, it was more like planning and then seeing, I'm like, okay, well, the flights are insane. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll drive up. And then it was like a 23-hour flight, a 23-hour drive. And then a week out, hotels were like $800, $900,000 a night. And I was just like, what is going on over here?
No, if you're going to do Oshkosh, and this is my recommendation for anybody listening that wants to go that may have never done it, if you want to check Oshkosh off your list and you want to go, you need to book like a year in advance for at least your stay. Your plane flight, like your flights, you can wait till you get much, much closer because you can't even book a flight a year out anyway. Yeah, we booked our Airbnb in February, March, and it's not till end of July for next year. It's like Oshkosh hadn't even happened this year, and we were already booking for next year.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and that's the other thing. So, like, we know, like, before we went 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever it was, before we went, my dad, one of his coworkers, goes every year. And he's like, yeah, there was one year they went up and they flew into Appleton, which is about 20, 25 minutes from Oshkosh. And he said they were all out of rental cars. He said he had to rent a U-Haul van just to get around because they didn't have any more rental cars. And so, like, it's insane. I mean, you really have to think about it. It kind of makes sense because you're talking about over the week of Oshkosh, you're talking about 650,000 people that go through that event. I think they hit 670 this year. It just keeps getting bigger, which is awesome. But it's also insane how many people flow through that event over, 6-7 days. But again, it's one of those things where I can say that you will see things fly that you never thought you'd see. I mean, this year they had the U-2 fly in, land, and stay in Boeing Plaza for pretty much the whole week. And then you also had, what was it, the Messerschmitt 262 fly?
Oh, yeah. That's the first time I've ever seen one of those fly.
I think that's the only one in the world that's airworthy, if I'm not mistaken. For me, it was getting to see the Polaris MiG-29 fly. Like, when we went, I was like, what? He flew in, like, Jared flew in that thing with the Polaris team. I didn't know anything about it. And all of a sudden, this MiG-29 comes flying in, and I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, you just check things off a list that I never thought I'd see fly. Like, okay.
Yeah, he brought that to Fort Lauderdale Air and Sea Show a few years back. And that was amazing. Have you seen the new F5 that they're flying with now? It's like a starry theme on it.
I'm
gonna have to send you that.
Okay. I'm curious to see where we go with demo teams next year. because I feel like there's some stuff out there that could really turn some heads that may be popping up. I mean, you've got that one that you're talking about, which I've never seen or heard of. And obviously, we always get excited around ICAS to see who's going where and when for each air show. One of the biggest things for me is always trying to see what warbirds are going where. Because obviously there's few and far between these days, and the numbers keep dwindling as maintenance costs get higher and parts become harder to source for them and stuff like that, and the costs continue to get harder for them to keep them airworthy. But yeah, so
yeah, I'd like to see Jared fly the whole group again down in South Florida. Let's hope for Sun and Fun next year. See if they come down.
Yeah, I mean they did Sun and Fun. I think their first Sun and Fun was the year I did Aviation Photo Crew, because I actually didn't go to Sun and Fun. I didn't go into the event that year. I literally drove down to Lakeland and I flew all day, and then I came home. Like I got to witness some of it from the ground over at because when Aviation Photo Crew flies out of Lakeland, they fly from the opposite side of the airport, out of the Shelter FBO over there. So you're not really on air show side. You're over across the runway. So it's not like you can go walk statics or anything like that. It's kind of difficult to do. But I remember when we were walking out after our sunset flight, the evening air show, because it was a Wednesday night that I did it. The evening air show was kicking off, and it was the F-35 and then the Polaris team to start off the evening air show. So I remember just standing there next to the FBO, and I had my camera in hand, and I was just like capturing a little bit of it from the other side of the airport. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But yeah, then I didn't go that weekend because Sun Up Fun sometimes falls around my wife's birthday. So it's like I have to kind of have to prioritize. Can't always put air shows before everything.
Man, I think we could talk for like another hour.
Oh, absolutely.
But we've reached our hour already. Well, I'm gonna have to talk to you again. We'll have to figure out a new date for next year. See what's coming up. And are you doing any air shows this year?
I wanted to do Stewart this year. I was contemplating it. Obviously, here in Orlando, we've got the Orlando Sanford Air Show over at Sanford Airport. That's in 3 weeks, the weekend of the 25th. I'm not going to be there for that one, even though that's right there in my backyard. I may drive down on Sunday and just kind of watch it from like a parking lot or something. I wanted to do Stewart. I wish I would have done Stewart last year. I so regret that. And I've become friends with Cooper. Yeah, through social media, and like just seeing his content from last year's Stewart show as the final A10 demo. I was like, oh, I should have gone. But yeah, no, I kind of wanted to go to Stewart this year, but it kind of falls on a weekend that I'm unavailable. I think it's the second weekend of November. It's like the 7th or something like that. And then, I don't think I'm really doing anything because air show season is pretty much almost over after that.
It's over at Stewart. Stewart's the last show of the year, I believe, in South Florida or in Florida.
Yeah, everybody keeps trying to get me to go to Warbirds over in Monroe. And then obviously there's always, what is it? I can't even pronounce it, Geneseo? Is that the big one up in New York with the grass runway? And that's a big Warbird show up there. Everybody tries to get me to go to that one as well. I'm going to have to venture outside of Florida for some air shows other than just Oshkosh, I think, in the next year or so, and start getting out to a few more because I feel like there's so much untapped. Yeah, we have some good ones here. With like, I'm spoiled with Oshkosh and Sun and Fun, right? Like, I go to those two, and it's like, what more do I need? But then I'm like looking at some of the other air shows, and I'm like, man, I really should go to some of these. I mean, we've got the one. So, ironically enough, and I don't know if they did this on purpose, but the Jacksonville Air Show, the Jacksonville NAS Air Show, which I think it's actually the beach air show this year, isn't it? Or is it at the
It's on the beach.
Yeah, so that's the same weekend as the Sanford one here. So the Angels will be flying in Jacksonville if the shutdown decides to come to a halt and everything goes back to normal. And the sad part about that is like if the Orlando Air Show, like if the government shutdown's still going on and the Thunderbirds don't fly and the 18 doesn't fly, because those are the two big demos that they've got for that air show here, it's not going to be much of an air show.
Yeah, that's my plan this month was to go to Wings Over North Georgia, and I work for the FAA, so I'm technically in a shutdown mode, furlough mode. So it's like, okay, well, if I don't get paid, I can't really travel. So we'll see. Waiting for the shutdown to end, but it doesn't look like any side wants to play nice for the people. It's all about themselves. So,
Yeah.
just
And it's sad too because we're losing out in so many different ways. Like
yeah,
air shows are suffering significantly, obviously, um, but there's so many other things as well. But
yeah. All right, Brandon, we got BC. Welcome. There's a few awesome people that joined in earlier. P40 Tom joined in. He peeked his head in and then kind of like disappeared a little bit. BC
his
captures.
ears were
Howdy.
burning as soon as I said his name. He's like, "Let me pop in here."
Let's end it. I don't want to get cut off by Instagram. So last thing, where can people find your photos at?
You can find all my work on B Connelly Photo here on Instagram. So BConnellyPhoto is my Instagram handle. BrandonConnellyPhotography.com on my website. I'm on Facebook as well as Brandon Connelly Photography. Those are the three main places. I don't really post on Threads much. I'm not on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, really. I mainly stick to Instagram for the most part. So yeah, I mean, this is my number one place, and then my website.
Yeah, this is also my number one place. Real quick, do you believe in the Dash 8 supremacy?
All right, so what is that?
Man, we're gonna have to kick that on another episode. But the Dash 8, the Golden Knights, they fly in a Dash 8. We'll have to keep that one for the next show there.
I just got to show
All
off the
right, dude.
logo. I got new stickers made. Oh, I've got patches as well too, hook and loop patches.
Oh, sweet. All right, Brandon, it was a good having you on tonight. We definitely have to catch up again next year.
Absolutely.
Have a good night. Thanks for joining.
Of course.
All right. Peace out, everyone. Have a good night.